Does anybody want to come up? There is an empty chair here now. Yeah?
Hello.
Sarovar, do you want to come up here in front? We're just waiting for Sankalp to come. I think he's coming in a minute. Instead of a formal, rehearsed conversation, what Charles is suggesting is that he's happy to take questions from you all and convert that in. Yes, well, both of you, both Sankalp and him, and convert that into a sort of a conversation rather than have it just two-way. I mean, just them and leaving the audience out. So we'll be here starting in a minute. He's probably terrified speaking to you.
No, I think he's overcome with emotion. But I think also, why don't you start asking questions, whatever your comments are, because I think you'll have been patient for a very, very long time. My God, it's 10 to 8. Yeah? Yeah, the bridge, well, it just connects those two buildings, but I knew it had to be very, very special because it is a piece of jewelry, engineering jewelry, and it's got highest integrity, and it's done by a German firm. They only did the bridge, which is one of the best, probably the best in the world for that kind of thing. It's a very high-tech bridge, and it's just glass, and it's got these cables which keep it, and it's 60 feet long. It's a very big bridge, and it's a wonderful thing crossing it. Yeah. Because you see, you've got these stone walls. This is the one thing your eye can catch, except for those two columns, and that's how you. I mean, that's the game you're playing. That's how you. In fact, I think there's a big relationship between architecture and filmmaking. Well, first of all, both of us, filmmakers to architects, we deal with, we're not living in an ivory tower. If I'm a painter and I start a painting and I don't like it, I just turn it to the wall and do something else or start again. If I start a building, if he starts a film, you start a process, a socio-economic process over which you have no control. If you walk out, someone else will finish it. So you have to stay and fight till the bitter end or get your way. And but I like that. I like the fact that architects, it means that you're part of the bazaar. You are not living in this ivory tower, which I think is very, very dangerous. It's, it makes you see real things about people. Well, we could discuss it, it'll take some time, but I just don't like the idea the way art has moved back from dealing with people and has become this fetish of museums. It's very sick, actually. I'm sorry, Anupam burns his living that way, but I'm sure he agrees with me. It's really terrible. It's become a new religion. As the real religions die, especially in the West, you get these maniacs, these very rich people who fly to the opening of a new museum like vultures, as culture vultures, and they're very proud of it. In fact, when you go abroad, at least for me, you go to a city and there are two kinds of sacred ceremonies. One is the opening of there's a museum with its sacred rituals. The other is the shopping mall. And I think that involves sacred rituals. The whole middle-class family goes on Saturdays, then they disperse, they meet in the food court, disperse again. Now, the people who go to museums despise the shopping malls because they're down market. But in actual fact, both are substitutes for religion, to my mind. I've said enough.
Yeah, keep that. That's for you.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, hello. Very good evening. And if there are any questions, with regard to the film, I'd be very happy to. Yes.
Not very long.
Very long. My cameraman was like Superman. Actually, I got really lucky. because we found like a person in Lisbon who has this service of like a drone camera, like it's called an octocopter. So he mounts the camera on these eight rotating wings, and he's able to guide it exactly and precisely along the path that like I tell or whoever is the director tells. And it is able to do the things that no rig or crane can do. In fact, he did some risky things which he had never done earlier, which was to run it in an enclosed space inside a corridor. Because that corridor is, although it is big enough, but you know, even a little deviation can crash it into a wall straight away. But you know, if you've seen that shot, which is on the corridor where the people are sitting below and it's going, Charles and Monica are also sitting there. They were under great risk actually. So, but we never told them about the risk. So, but yeah, that's the octocopter.
Yeah, I have a question for you. On those,
He just said, can you identify yourself before
my
asking?
name is Sarovar, and I'm a student of anthropology and also working on religious architecture. But my question is related to those two columns, pillars. I don't know what the technical word for them is. They kind of look like uh, an underlining of the horizon, like architectural underlines that you kind of draw into the horizon. Um, uh, but it would be interesting for me to understand more about them and why do you actually put them in?
You just said why. You said exactly why to emphasize the horizon. You follow? It's to emphasize the horizon, and that's what they do. It's basically, it's also two columns like that make a kind of darwaza. There's no cross piece, but when you enter the site, you go with between two stone buildings with the glass bridge forms another kind of darwaza as an entrance, and then this thing echoes it. So we could go into what I told you about the ritualistic pathway. I didn't have time and it's too boring. I hope someday one of you, or many of you, will go to Lisbon and see it. Because you have to experience architecture. I'm so glad we had this film because whatever slides you show, any building can look good in slides. It's only the space and the light and the mood. And what's amazing about the old buildings, whether it's Modera, whether it's the Taj, when I show my own buildings or any architect, we choose the best photographs from the best angle. When you see the Taj, it's some tourist who's taken this picture and it still has a knockout. So they get it very, very right because it's very important. But I guess to answer your question, I feel what you have to do, at least what I try to do, is translate the mood you want or the relationship of horizon, etc., the emphasis you want into some physical solution. It's just like words. A writer uses words or a filmmaker uses the camera. That's your métier, is to use lines and stuff. In fact, there's a huge connection, I think, I've always felt, even before I knew Sankalp, between design, architecture, and filmmaking. Who embodied it was a man called Charles Eames, who was a brilliant man, who came to India very often. He started the NID, he and Ray Eames. And the connection, and he did both brilliant films and wonderful architecture. And design also. He designed all these chairs, you know the Eames chairs. I think the thing is that both architects and filmmakers, I find, they are very visual and quick at analyzing visual things. They're very quick. I mean, it's not that they just get this mood, oh my God, how, they're looking to see how did that happen, whether it's the timing, whether it's the scene before. And so what you're looking at in his films or anybody's is you're looking at a montage of different scenes which tell a story, which is a description in a way of architecture, of anything you want, even of landscape. It's a series of images which you have to you manipulate, but in a natural way. I hate artificial manipulation, but basically you are organizing that. So I think that is why many very brilliant filmmakers are also architects. Antonioni was an architect, a whole lot of people, you know them. They've all studied architecture. And I think they have this in common, which is not true in many other fields where you don't really need this ability to deal with the outside world, nor do you have the necessity to plan your whole. I mean, the way he planned that film, he went there for 1 week, of which 3 days it was raining. Unbelievable in Portugal. But he shot anyway, and then he used it all. And he came back and edited it in 3 days again.
The other day, actually, I was at Charles's house, and he was talking about this way of, I mean, I think that's the way everybody does it, but in his case, he said, you know, there are images that you have, like, or flashes of things that you see and things that are not really worked out. And then the whole thing is then, when you design something, you sort of piece it together like a puzzle. That, and especially when you're acquiring footage, when you're shooting architecture, you know, you don't even have an idea of what the final picture is going to be like. But still you're creating those little pieces which are going to fit into the puzzle in some way, you hope. And what he said is right, is that this assessment, that visual assessment of, is this a workable, usable image? Or half usable, or partly usable? Can I use it for a little while? Is this like an emblematic image? Is this going to be the image which people will remember? You have to make very quick assessments and roll the camera very quickly, because it's a speculation. Like, you speculate and you say, okay, maybe this might work. Take it now. And then you work with, hopefully, enough material from which you can make a final film. But, I mean, of course, among the many things that are common between architecture and films, the one thing that actually distinguishes cinema from architecture is the question of time and time performance. And that is really difficult, you know, when you're trying to make a film on architecture, as to what time value to give that film. Actually, I mean, I really feel that this is the pace and languor with which you need to deal with buildings of this kind. Generally, films do a disservice to architecture because they misread the time value. See, you cannot, because, you know, there's a misconception that people have that, you know, in editing you can change the inherent time value of a shot. You can't, because the time value is imprinted in the shot. It's like each shot is carrying its own time value, and it's like a mosaic of different times that you're fitting into. So it's a much more complex puzzle than it looks like. You know, there are shots which carry with them an inherent duration. You can't cut it earlier than that, and you can't keep it longer than what you want. So it's a very interesting sort of, what you can say, like a tension between architecture and film.
Yeah, like architecture photography, architecture magazines have a lot of photographs in which they construct horizons. So you had it easier in this case because his architecture was already embodying the idea of the horizon within.
No, actually, there's somebody else who wants to. Yeah.
Hello, sir. Let me just say that it's been a privilege for me to see this and to see such a brilliant building, as I'm sure everybody will agree. I'm an art historian, and I have to say I've been to Portugal, and I was told to see the Champollion Center, but I stopped just short of it and didn't have the time to go into it, so I missed it. But I will do so at some point. And my question is that everything seems to be a metaphor in this building, and I think it's very easy to understand the metaphor of discovery but I was just wondering, most of your lines are round, elliptical and round, and I was wondering if, you know, if the fact that the earth is round in the mandala And that provided some stability before you go into the unknown or something. That has some kind of unconscious.
No, that
In
had
your-
nothing
no.
to do with the mandala.
Okay.
It was just that the site is a triangular site with a curved periphery. If it had been a rectangular site and I did something like that, it would look ridiculous. Why these suddenly curves? You understand? Imagine a typical site and you suddenly make no, the curves came out of that. And I think that's what, when one paints, I suppose, or writes, or as an architect, I think what I said about Gaston Bachelard, you know, it's you don't know why you do something. What's very sad is that I used to teach at MIT in the fall, and people, they try to get students aware of how you design and stuff. And a student, for instance, I'll give you an example, is doing, the class is doing a house in Istanbul. And so the student has a blue door, front door. And they say, why a blue front door? And he says, because there's a blue mosque. And a lot of the faculty say, hey, that's very interesting, that's subtle. Someone says it's stupid, etc. You know, this fellow said it isn't cause and effect because you can't analyze it. It's sad that people actually create art just through sheer hard work. Like, so I'm not a musician. I love music. I'm not a musician. But if I had to write a symphony and I had no talent, like I don't, and I knew Beethoven said tung 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 tung. So in clever reference to that, I'll say tung 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 tung, tung 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 tung. That's how they write. And out of left field comes Cole Porter and he says, I've got you under my skin. How did he think of that? That is what it's that depth charge which sends to the surface the debris of recognition. And you have to wait for that moment. Why you did it in retrospect. In fact, a lot of the things, you know, actually I read somewhere that lots of, Jung I think said that we don't think in a linear line. We think in a kind of random way. It's like a ricochet thing, you know, like this table is red. So I go to that wall and say, that wall is red, but this table used to be red. Then I go there and finally I'm convinced the table is red because I've come back. So the thing is that is how we connect things. And all this comes from the fact that, you know, a child, someone described a baby beautifully. They said a baby is born with a brain which is hardware, and they have to write their own software to live. So the poor baby, right from the beginning, is looking around, trying to see when are they going to get fed, and when will they get a slap and get too hot. And then after some time, they begin to realize they get it all right. Okay. But the information they're getting is all random access, whatever you call ROM, RAM, whatever. Now, what piece fits where, to my mind, is a jigsaw puzzle. When you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, you know that I need a piece with this kind of funny shape with a brown spot here and yellow in the center. And you look and suddenly you find it. That's why we love jigsaw puzzles. This idea of we think in that way, in the way Jung described, but because of very intelligent and disciplined people like the Germans, we've learned to put our thinking in a continuous linear line, especially architects. So to convince the client, I have to pretend I started here and I went there. Ridiculous. You go back, you retrace your steps, and you know which one. I'm sure you have to do it with your films
Yeah,
too.
I mean, there are a lot of filmmakers also who have written books, you know, about their films. Primary among them, like a very good example is Eisenstein, who wrote like a pretty good analysis of his own work. But I mean, if you were to try and emulate what he said he did to make Battleship Potemkin, you'll never get there, because you have to be, quote unquote, an instinctive thinking, creative artist to do what he did. I mean, Battleship Potemkin is really fantastic. But the post facto theorization of that film is not the way to reach the film. There's something that he did, and then later on he analyzed it and made it into a logical construction. You know?
Yeah.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
Others can hear you.
Question is to Sankalp. Most of the time, the film at the background, you have the sea and the river and the sea, and the city comes in much later in the end, and that too for a very short while as a backdrop. Now, was it really planned for? And the
No, it wasn't planned. I mean, the only thing was, as you know, to shoot the city in the background, you'll have to shoot from the seaside, for which you have to be on a boat or you have to be on the octocopter. So the one shot that we had with the city in the background was from the octocopter, was from that height. Otherwise, it's very difficult to see the city from where you are because the walls are also pretty high at the side. And of course, I would imagine that, you know, the water and the sea lends much more character to the space. I mean, of course, you do need a spatial relationship with the sea, but I think the sea and the water is much more important.
Myself, Pratik, I'm an architect, and my question is for Charles, sir. Just wanted to know, when is it that you're actually at peace with what you've created? Because architecture is a long process, and from what I understand, artists